Celebrate the big 2020 with T-Mobile. Switch now and get 2 lines for just $90 and 2 new iPhone 11s on us. So you can take a portrait built for 2 with the ultra-wide camera.
Oh, that's a good one.
Oh, cute.
Hurry in to T-Mobile and get 2 lines for $90 and 2 iPhone 11s on us with qualifying trade-ins.
Via 24 credits for well-qualified buyers with AutoPay, plus taxes and fees. If you cancel before receiving 24 credits, you may owe up to the full value of your device of $699.99. Contact us. Qualifying port-ins and finance agreements required.
Celebrate the big 2020 with T-Mobile. Switch now and get 2 lines for just $90 and 2 new iPhone 11s on us. So you can take a portrait built for 2 with the ultra-wide camera.
Oh, that's a good one.
Oh, cute.
Hurry in to T-Mobile and get 2 lines for $90 and 2 iPhone 11s on us with qualifying trade-ins.
Via 24 credits for well-qualified buyers with AutoPay, plus taxes and fees. If you cancel before receiving 24 credits, you may owe up to the full value of your device of $699.99. Contact us. Qualifying port-ins and finance agreements required.
You know, Marie, I was actually thinking, for this episode, I was thinking of different like titles and things. And one that I was thinking would be really funny is, I'm not a Schleimann man, I'm a demon man. Like in that, you know, I'm not a whatever. I'm a method man. Anyways, Schleimann part 3.
Did you just Wu-Tan?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not a gentleman. I'm a method man.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I get it. Even I, the whitest lady you know, got the reference. I'm just like, oh Lord. Oh,
it's gonna be great. I should have been a rapper. Anyways,
should have been.
All right. So last
Should have
episode,
been. You still can be.
give me time. So last episode, we got up to the point where Schleimann, sort of like he decides to start spending all of his money that he kind of made in weird ways on destroying ancient sites. Right? Like that's his plan.
He's amassed wealth. He's gotten rid of a wife. He's lean and mean and ready to go and discover and pillage culture.
Right. So
as you do.
Right, which is the dream of all people. So 1868, he decides, okay, I'm going to Greece. Right, and he wants to visit the Homeric sites and kind of look around the different sites in Asia Minor and all over the place. And he meets with a person who becomes really important to this story, who is the English archaeologist Frank Calvert.
Yeah.
Now, Marie, why is Calvert important?
Calvert is important because he's basically the guy who discovered and knew about the site, right? I mean, that's how I look at it, is that he was the actual brains behind the operation and had done all the legwork.
Right.
And it's so funny because now he's just sort of like whited out from all of that, from any discussion about Schleimann was, you know, the single-handed with his book of the Odyssey and the Iliad, you know, traveling to Rome and just, you know, having the muse speak to him through his 17-year-old wife or whatever it is. He discovers this site, which is, you know, again, just a pure work of fiction. That this was, you know, there were more people involved and they don't really get very much credit.
Right. So he gets to 1867, he meets Calvert. And Schleimann will publish his first book on archaeology, which he calls Ithaca der Peloponnese und Troja, which translates to Ithaca, the Peloponnese, and Troy. Right? Easy. He says that basically, he essentially says in that work that he has been convinced that Hisarlik is the site of Troy.
Yes.
What he doesn't say is that Calvert is the one who was like, hey, I think this is Troy. And so he just leaves him out, right? He just completely leaves this guy out from the story, which is nuts, right?
Yeah, but it's sort of par for the course. I mean, this is how he was, I don't want to say how he was raised, but he definitely has this type of entitlement in his family. I mean, he has made his wealth not by being a really nice guy who's been considerate to other people.
Yeah. And so which is kind of in some ways, kind of the history of like a lot of science,
History.
early science.
That's kind of the history of history.
Kind of the story of history up until, like even in modern days, there are times that stuff like that happens, and it's pretty, But anyways, so, we never hear about the grad students that were working with Einstein, right?
Not so much.
So, or the young physicists, I guess I should say. But anyways, so in the same work, he also claims some other things, right? He says that he believes that the Greek commander Agamemnon and his wife, Clytemnestra, cannot say it. Cletus, Aggie and Cletus are buried at Messenia, or which was described at being, what's the word? Basically described by Greek historians as being kind of not in Troy necessarily, but like near Troy, right? Is that kind of?
Yeah, they're sort of the Agamemnon and Clytemnestra are sort of the two big characters from those stories, or at least from, the beginning of one of them. And it's like they are closely associated almost, by proxy. So if you're going to discover Troy, you really had better be discovering something from the two of them, from this dynasty, or from this ruler, because that is what has been written, and that is what has been sort of ingrained as canon. Like that's the proof you need to say, hey, this is Troy. So of course, he's going to go in and make these claims regardless. Pretty much regardless of what the facts are telling him, that's like, this is where Agamemnon and Clytemnestra are buried, and this is like, this is Troy.
Okay. So it's like finding if in 1,000 years, right, you find the Washington Monument, you assume this must be, or you find you find this great mausoleum in the middle of an area that's sort of like where Washington D.C. is, and you kind of figure, well, this must be where the site of Washington D.C. was, or whatever.
Or
right?
if that's Lincoln, if you see Lincoln and it's not an ape,
right? It's probably right.
Then it's okay. First, it's still this reality. Check.
Yep.
Good up on you. And it's probably Washington D.C.
So he's in he's in Greece now. He's kind of found this site that he thinks might be this, whatever. Prior to this, too, he's kind of laid down some roots in Greece by marrying, he divorces his Russian wife again in that kind of weird scheme he had. And he marries in 1869 a young Greek schoolgirl named Sophia Angastromenos. And he actually meets her through like super early Tinder, which is weird, as a marriage bureau.
A marriage bureau, which is basically like an arranged marriage, right? Right. So legit, like, you come in with a bunch of money and you're like, yeah, I'll take out 5'7", 5'8".
Right. So literally the only excavations this guy is able to do in his personal life and in his work life are through the work of others.
Pretty much. Yes. Again, history.
Wonderful.
There you go. That's kind of history.
Wonderful. Yes. All right. So before Schleimann gets to Hisarlik, has any idea that it's a thing at all, a bunch of other stuff has happened at the site already. So remember, 1869, he's kind of in the area and is convinced 1867-ish that Hisarlik must be the site. All right?
Yes.
Previous to that, we had who, Marie?
So we had a couple of different people. Besides Calvert, we had a French geologist, Frederick, oh God. Oh, seriously, dude? Like now pronouncing the name?
Ferdinand Foch.
Fook? Are you sure?
It's
you are, right? I can't tell if you're laughing at me. That's the sad thing. All right, let's just start that one over.
Fook? Hold on. It's a terrible last
Okay. No, I think it's Fouquet.
Fouquet?
Well, seriously, like the E, like, oh man. Where's something that pronounces something? Because I think it's pronounced Fouquet because it's like bouquet, right? And the E is still put a B in front of that, and that's bouquet. So I'm going to say Ferdinand Fouquet. What do you?
So close to fuck. Hey, hold on.
Oh God.
Okay, hold on. Pronouncenames.com.
I'm holding. Yeah, this is
Yeah, it's Fouquet.
Yes. Oh man, I'm telling you what. That high school French pegging off.
Ferdinand
What?
Bucky. All right.
What? All right.
Okay.
So he definitely wasn't the first or only archaeologist or scientist that was interested in what was happening on these sites. French geologist Ferdinand Fouquet dug in a similar location in 1862 and found fresco-covered walls of different houses and painted pottery. And this was all beneath about 26 feet of pumice. So there was a lot of archaeology already occurring there. And Calvert himself had begun to dig at Hisarlik, and authorities now believe that he was instrumental, that he was the person who convinced Schliemann, hey, you know what, if you put your money and your time here, but especially your money, this is the site of Troy. So I would say that Calvert was definitely more science-based and was probably a better archaeologist, but he also did not have the funding to continue digging and excavating. So he needed resources from someone like Schliemann, and I think that that's sort of where that partnership grew some roots.
Got it. Okay. So, and for listeners too, the importance of that pumice, right, that Fouquet digs through. Pumice rock, you're used to using like a pumice stone or maybe having one. For the guys listening, it is the unknowable stone in your shower for some reason.
Women.
Basically,
the ladies and their unknowable rocks.
What a pumice stone does is it
what does it do?
It's super porous.
It's got all these bottles and stuff. What do they do?
I actually really like using pumice stones, Marie. I have They're great.
I'm standing down. I'm standing down.
No, it's fine. Understandable. So, pumice is a volcanic rock, right? It's formed. Mm-hmm. It's very, very porous. That's why it's so kind of good at, scratching and holding soaps and whatever and pulling stuff out of the skin and all that stuff. Pumice stones are, they're volcanic rock that form from volcanic eruptions. So finding pumice in the ground there suggests that there must have been a volcanic eruption at some point. And finding it above areas that have walls and pottery and all these other shards and things suggests that there was a volcanic eruption that covered all that stuff.
Yes, sort of like Pompeii.
Right. So it suggests that there was some kind of, like we said in the very kind of first part of touching on this story about Troy, it suggests very highly that there was some I guess you'd say geological reason for the issue that occurred, right? Or for leaving the city ultimately.
Yes.
But Calvert essentially is like, I don't have any money, so why don't you help me fund this? Because you're a rich, eccentric man who's so in love with Troy that you came to Greece and married a Greek woman.
Yes.
And so Schliemann's like, all right, let's do it.
Here you go.
And so the problem of Schliemann, I guess, or the problem of archaeology at the time period, is that, first off, like we said in the very first series of episodes, Troy at this point is basically a giant mound. There's every time the city gets demolished, dirt is kind of like piled on top of it and a new city is formed. And so you can imagine that over time, as kind of more ground is laid to be flat and more fortifications are built, and then there's natural disasters that fill it up with even more sand or more rock or whatever, that you can really quickly end up with something like, like when you used to go to, I don't know, summer camps or whatever, and people would put the layers of sand one on top of the other, right? And so Schliemann, however, has no conception of this, really. And it seems so obvious to us because we're describing it and everything else, but he doesn't know to kind of carefully dig out this site in a systemic way.
Yeah.
He's digging down. Right. He's digging down for what he wants.
Straight to the bottom.
Right. He's going to go down as far as he can and try to find evidence of Troy with no consideration for the fact that each of those layers subsequent to him discovering what he thinks looks important is also a really important part of the story.
Right. And could alter what his assumptions are if he's paying attention. Right?
Exactly.
So yeah, but why bother with that? And the thing that's sort of frustrating about this narrative is he's ultimately rewarded for this, though. I mean, or it could be construed that he is rewarded for his shoddy craft, because after the break, we'll tell you what he actually finds.
Celebrate the big 2020 with T-Mobile. Switch now and get 2 lines for just $90 and 2 new iPhone 11s on us. So you can take a portrait built for 2 with the ultra-wide camera.
Oh, that's a good one.
Oh, cute.
Hurry in to T-Mobile and get 2 lines for $90 and 2 iPhone 11s on us with qualifying trade-ins.
Via 24 credits for well-qualified buyers with autopay, plus taxes and fees. If you cancel before receiving 24 credits, you may owe up to the full value of your device of $699.99. Contact us. Qualifying port-ins and finance agreements required.
Celebrate the big 2020 with T-Mobile. Switch now and get 2 lines for just $90 and 2 new iPhone 11s on us. So you can take a portrait built for 2 with the ultra-wide camera.
Oh, that's a good one.
Oh, cute.
Hurry in to T-Mobile and get 2 lines for $90 and 2 iPhone 11s on us with qualifying trade-ins.
Via 24 credits for well-qualified buyers with autopay, plus taxes and fees. If you cancel before receiving 24 credits, you may owe up to the full value of your device of $699.99. Contact us. Qualifying port-ins and finance agreements required.
And we're back.
So Schleimann starts digging in 1871. He assumes from the get-go that Troy must be on the lowest level of archaeological evidence they find. Mm-hmm. Which is, I guess it's a good place to start, kind of.
Right?
But it doesn't, it's kind of like, I don't know. It's a weird assumption to make, I guess. It's hard. But it's hard to know. Again, he's kind of like just starting he's just starting archaeology as it's a thing. There's not a lot of rules going along at the time, right? At this period of time. So where do you start?
There's not a lot of ethics.
No. So where do you start?
Right?
So he just starts, again, he just kind of starts digging through without any concern for what's there otherwise. He finally discovers something of value in 1873.
Yes.
He finds, he seems to find, or he thinks he finds fortifications.
Yes.
That suggests.
It is reported that he finds. We'll put it that way.
That he believes represent the great walls of Troy. Mm-hmm. Although they're not as great as you'd expect. But again, there's time and everything else, or whatever. He also finds gold jewelry, a treasure, in fact. That he will call it a treasure, and it is a treasure, of course. They're beautiful and they're from antiquity and whatever. And then also finds, vessels of different metals and ceramics and pottery and all this other stuff. Now, he finds this stuff and then immediately smuggles it out of the country because it's his and he found it and it's not the people's that lived there before.
Right. There's even some question about, did he smuggle it in? There's some question about, especially with the treasure. I think if you think about it, yes, this site or this area is rumored to have archaeological finds, right? But that doesn't necessarily equate into treasure. That's exactly what you were talking about. We're going to find some shards of pottery. We're going to find, places where people lived, and sort of more like everyday life. This is how they lived, which is, I would say, probably 98% of archaeology is uncovering culture and, trying to preserve it. It's not digging for treasure. And so all of a sudden he finds a gold treasure that's pretty substantial. And like you said, and then smuggles it out. But was it there to begin with?
So he called the treasure will eventually become known as Priam's treasure. Priam being because he believed that they were from the Homeric king Priam. Currently, they sit in the Pushkin Museum in Moscow. Pushkin being a famous Russian author who helped normalize and popularize the Russian language. Marie. Anyways,
nice.
I had to learn a lot about
somewhere.
I had to learn a lot about Pushkin in high school Russian. So, anyways, the treasure itself
Can we just pause for a moment and appreciate the fact that you took high school Russian?
Dos
In high
Vidania.
school?
So the treasure itself,
my
the
God.
famous photo of the treasure is actually of Sophia Schleimann, his wife,
Yes.
wearing those
Second
jewels.
Mrs. Schleimann.
Right.
Yes.
So they will call them the jewels of Helen. That's who knows whose jewels they were, but basically it's this treasure hoard that he finds contains a bunch of stuff made out of copper, like shields, cauldrons, vases, diadems, blades of knives, goblets, all just metal stuff, a whole bunch of metal stuff.
just a
right?
whole bunch, just a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah,
too.
and
Like,
so-
this is a pretty good hoard. And
It is.
We also should call out, again, I think that is, you hit the nail on the head. It's very famous, or mostly the most famous representation of this treasure is of her wearing it, which again is just sort of this massive vanity project, right? It's it doesn't really matter where these artifacts came from or what their true story is. They're immediately appropriated into jewelry for his young bride.
Yeah.
And kind of to substantiate himself too, because Schliemann is now, getting up there in age and is, not too much of a treasure, if you don't mind me saying. But it's sort of it's even more gross because, here they are being, worn around.
Yeah,
Anyways, okay.
and he immediately starts telling tall tales about the treasure, right? So this is
course.
from his own what's the word? This is from one of his own works. He says, quote, "In excavating this wall further and directly by the side of the palace of King Priam, I came upon a large copper article of the most remarkable form, which attracted my attention all the more as I thought I saw gold behind it. In order to withdraw the treasure from the greed of my workmen and to save it for archaeology, I immediately had Pados lunch break called. While the men were eating and resting, I cut out the treasure with a large knife. It would, however, have been impossible for me to have removed the treasure without the help of my dear wife, who stood by me ready to pack the things which I cut out in her shawl and to carry them away. Now, a couple problems with this. Number one, his wife was in Athens at the time visiting her family. So, yeah, he just...
So it wasn't really his dear wife.
No, and so we don't know where the treasure came from even.
Right.
It's
exactly.
there's all these he is a con man at his core. And this is a great story, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
he ultimately what we find or what we now think is that he likely excavated down to the very lowest layer, which we call Troy 1. However, Troy 6, the sixth layer of the city, was likely Homeric Troy.
Yes, which is what he was gunning for.
Right, so he just dug right through all that crap.
Just
Right?
yep,
I don't want any of that. I don't want
this doesn't look
any of that.
interesting. I mean, yeah, let the serfs steal this stuff, whatevs. That's the other
ridiculous.
thing I love is he's I had to keep it away from them. They'd take it. And meanwhile, he's sneaking out of Turkey.
Right, he's just got
Nice.
got knives, every way you can hide them. So he again discovers this, starts talking about this being potentially Troy in 1874, and then is immediately sued by the Ottoman government, who owns the land at the time and had a right. I mean, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how else to call it, but it's on their land. It's part of their cultural heritage. Kind
Hey,
of
you
their
don't get to walk
stuff,
off
dude.
with it.
Yeah, kind of can't
kinda their
leave.
stuff.
Kind of can't leave the Ottoman Empire with Ottoman artifacts.
Yeah. Yeah. We
So-
don't come into your house, drink all your beer,
take all your
set your
cauldrons.
furniture on fire, and then walk out. No, we don't.
So it's It's rough. He gets sued. The Ottoman government says that he can't come back to Anatolia, where modern day Turkey, where this site is, and he doesn't get to come back until 1876. Right. In the meantime, he publishes another book, 1875, Troy and its Ruins. He also starts excavating at Mycenae.
The Troys I've ruined.
Right, the Troys I've ruined.
The Troys I've ruined.
Yeah. Starts digging out more stuff. Does find some things, of course. But again, he just is not careful in his excavations.
No.
And so just the stuff that he does ends up making more damage than if they had just been left behind. It's very similar to reports, I feel like, of grave robbing, of looting, I guess I would say, where, the stuff that the looter thinks is important is never the important stuff. They never care about like the hieroglyphics or the things that would showcase that this is an important thing.
Right. No, they only care about the value of something that's an artifact that's shiny.
Yeah. So kind of rough. That period of time is where he believes that he has found the tomb of Agamemnon and Clytemnestra. Clitus. And so again, publishes another work, 1878, called Mycenae. And so really he's away from Troy during these time periods, but is eventually allowed to go back at 1878.
Which is amazing.
Right. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So again, he's just kind of traveling around the countryside, ruining archaeological sites. And so he does excavate again, like we said, in 1880. Finally starts to excavate again. Supposedly is hoping to find the treasury of Minyas, which is in Boeotia. Doesn't find really anything there. Then is allowed back at Troy. Does a third excavation in 1882 to 83, and a fourth one in 1888.
Which is amazing, but they let him back in.
It's craziness.
It's got to be about money, right? That's what I'm thinking.
Probably, but you never know. So at first he's all on his own, right? He's just got his wife. But after that, in his second, third, and fourth excavations, he is joined by some actual considered to be pretty good archaeologists, right?
Right.
But
they're probably preserved stuff. Because it's also, we should say that he had been like for the last 7 years or so up to this point, the well had run dry. He wasn't finding very much or at all. So it's also that probably took a great toll on his financial well-being.
Yeah. And really, I mean, the things that come about at the end of his life, or I guess towards the end of his career, we should say, are probably more legitimate archaeologically than the earlier stuff because, again, they're being done with kind of a careful hand. He, in particular, works with Emil Bernouf, Rudolf Virchow, and then Wilhelm Dorpfeld. Dorpfeld, great last name. And Dorpfeld, in particular, is considered to be kind of an important figure in the development of the development of archaeology, I suppose. Specifically, he is said to be good at stratigraphy, which is kind of the idea of looking at the strata or layers of ground, right?
That you don't just dig to the bottom.
Right. You did what? Right. You don't just dig to the bottom and hope you find something good.
It's like,
But Schleimann will eventually die he dies on Christmas Day, 1890. From a really bad ear infection, which sounds crazy today, but
it was a curse,
right? But back then was like a lot more serious because they didn't have antibiotics and good stuff. So that's kind of the end of Schliemann's career, right?
Yes.
Now, it would appear from the outside looking in, and we kind of keep crapping on Schleimann, and we're sorry, but
sorry, not sorry, but yeah. I mean, yeah.
His career. So, Marie, give us When does the view of Schleimann start to kind of curdle? Right? When does it change?
I mean, I would say he's still warm in his grave, pretty much, is how I would look at it. I mean, I think, again, the critical science-based approach to archaeology you start to see come in sort of in assistance with his work towards the end of his life. But then even towards the end of his lifetime, it's clear that, he didn't do all of this excavation or discovery himself, that people like Frank Calvert actually deserve a lot of the responsibility for discovering what is considered Troy at Hisark. And that is, but basically, I think one of the things that came out of it is that people recognize that the way he went about things, even though it was sort of, again, this impassioned, romanticized, colonial view of antiquity, ended up like hurting our knowledge of actual antiquity itself, right? Because we destroyed it. Like, again, he had this sort of idealized notion of what he wanted to find, and kind of just destroyed anything else that didn't fit what he thought it should be. And he clearly, like you were saying, he was a con man. So all of his self-promotion and the methods of any critical thinking that would have cast any sort of doubt or questioned any of his claims, while he tried to eschew them during his lifetime, I think that came out more and more as soon as people started to realize that, that he didn't do all this himself, and that there were a lot of faults with his methodology. In some ways, he reminds me of Gilderoy Lockhart from Harry Potter. You know what I mean? Really, it's a Potter reference. This is good. We haven't had one of these in a while.
Great.
Go on.
I know. So
go on.
For those that haven't read the books 100 times like I have, Gilderoy Lockhart is a professor who's introduced in the second book, Chamber of Secrets. He is, spoiler alert ahead for a book that's like 20 years old at this point, but and has had movies made, whatever. But anyways,
yes.
He claims to have he is famous in the wizarding world for writing all these books dramatizing his exploits as a great wizard fighting the dark arts. So he's got these books that are all about him fighting werewolves and witches, or not really witches, but I don't know, warlocks or whatever, right? Evil things, vampires and mummies and ghouls and goblins and all this other stuff. But it turns out at the end of the book that he made all of it up. He stole other people's stories and introduced himself in them, and then kind of bundled stories together and did all these other things. A lot of stuff that Schleimann is accused of having done, right? Schleimann, we said he wrote a tremendous amount of books about his works as an archaeologist, and he's really in some ways responsible for popularizing archaeology as a field. Yeah. But like you were saying, Marie, he is famous in some ways for the inconsistencies in his stories as well. Or I guess I should say infamous, right?
Yeah.
There are thoughts by modern historians and archaeologists that he bundled his finds together. So in other words, maybe he did find all of Priam's treasure at that site, but certainly he would not have found it in one giant, like in a huge tomb, right? Under layers of rock. There was just this, you know what I mean? He just happens to find this pristine treasure hanging out. There's no way that happened, right? They also think that he might have, just based on the inconsistencies in the stuff itself, they also believe he might have taken finds from other sites and kind of just like tossed them in the sand. And just to make it seem like a site was of more importance, right? So, and frankly,
to better his own reputation and his own,
right. And so it makes the things that he says, makes the things that he said he did and accomplished nearly impossible to trust, even though he helped popularize archaeology in the public mind.
Yeah.
He probably did more for the funding of archaeology in terms of it being popularized and something that government started to care about and, all these other things. He's probably responsible to some great extent in a lot of that. But again, it's all kind of based on a myth of himself and on a myth of what he found. Yeah. And there's something I think longtime listeners of the show know how annoyed that makes me. That's somebody's, it's like fruit from the poison tree, right?
Yeah. So I look at it as if Schliemann is very much like a tragic Greek myth, right? He had this passion and this desire and this love of Troy that ultimately he destroyed it, right? So he fell so much in love with the thing that he couldn't have that he ultimately brought about its own ruin, and he didn't even realize that, right? So he's like Tantalus or Narcissus, exactly, right? That he basically is this tragic figure that couldn't see his own flaws, couldn't accept his own limitations in any of this, and also couldn't share his success or his learnings with anyone else, which besides being the basis of science, right, is you're discovering these things to teach and to learn, were a huge part of the stories that he loved, which was, of course, based on the hero of, the Odyssey, was on Odysseus, but it's also on a group of people, right? And the heroic efforts and the heroics of a group of people. So it's sort of, to me, it's really ironic and kind of sad in that way that for as much as he wanted this thing, the thing he got was really just sort of a pale, sort of probably ultimately unsatisfactory to even him. Like he probably was never satisfied with finding what he thought was Troy.
Well,
it disappoints himself, right? Which is such the Greek myth.
Well, you know what the funny thing is? It's very much so, I think, like you said, it's the dog who chases the car. And then when he catches it, he doesn't know what to do with it. And I think in some ways too, maybe that's not as good an analogy, but I did just rewatch The Dark Knight. So that's why that story is in my head. But it's almost like it's like meeting your hero. You know what I mean? It's never what you think it'll be. It's never as good as it was in your head. He built it up to such an extent that, I'm sure that in his mind, he was going to like fall through a cave or something and find the palace, right?
Yes.
Of Agamemnon.
Pristine.
Yes. Right, exactly. Like he was going to, but that's not, as opposed to it being just like, layers of city jelly in between a peanut butter and jelly sandwich of pumice stone. He didn't find what he thought. Now,
he didn't want to work for it either. I think that's the other thing is it's immediate gratification, right? Which is not what science is about. In a lot of ways, it's about like a lot of hard work.
Well, you actually that's actually a really interesting point. It is very much so like those memes that are up on the internet all the time that are like, on like Facebook pages that are, I effing love science or whatever, where people then are like, you don't love science, you love data. Like you really like pictures of stuff, but that's not even useful data, right? Like you would hate doing science, which is mostly Excel, which is fine, but it's not
great. Which is labor,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
It's like huge stretches, I imagine, not exactly being a scientist myself, but pretending to be one. It's like huge stretches of work without something coming to fruition.
It's like any job. You know what I mean? It would be, when I was a kid, I thought it'd be awesome to be in horror movies. I don't think it would be awesome today when I can't remember things that I just said 10 seconds ago. And also I can't sit still for makeup you know what I mean? Like I can't even imagine how challenging that is in its own way. So anyways, Schliemann, ultimately,
Schleimann.
Marie Schleimann, a tragic figure, I would say, just like you said.
Agreed.
Kinda
Agreed.
crazy.
I ultimately feel bad for him in a lot of ways. That again, he probably never was satisfied with anything that he found.
No, no, probably not.
Yep.
Which yeah,
Nope.
sad stuff.
But maybe, hopefully, the next archaeologist we get to won't be a complete and total jerk. Let's try another one.
We'll try another one. So,
There's gotta
listeners,
be somebody out there.
next series we are going to do one more archaeologist. Then we are going to do Kung Fu myths. I'm so excited.
I know. That's some good stuff.
All right, we love you, listeners. Thank you for listening.
Good night.
Thank you again, dear listeners, for listening to the Mad Scientist podcast. I have been your host, Chris Cogswell, joined by my co-host,
Marie Mayhew.
If you'd like to contact the show, please send us an email at themadscientistpodcast@gmail.com. That's all one word. You can also follow us on Twitter at Mad Scientist Pod or at Team Giant Squid for Marie. And of course, you can see us on Facebook, on Instagram, and all over the internet as the Mad Scientist Podcast. And again, our logo is the one with the pumpkin head, so it's easy to see. If you've enjoyed the show tonight, please consider supporting us on Patreon, where the money that you give to us will help us to promote this show further, to make it better, and just to spend more time making it.
We love doing that.
We do love doing that. Our logo was designed by Carrie Shaheen. Our web design is done by Desdemona Howard.
Woohoo!
And our sound design is done by Jake Cardinal. Thanks again for listening.
Thank you. This has been a Damn It Chippy production.
How to show up with Coca-Cola Energy. You're tired and you're thinking of canceling on your friends. Don't do it! Every time you cancel on a friend, a unicorn loses its horn and becomes a regular horse. Do you really want that on your conscience? Instead, grab an ice-cold can of Coca-Cola Energy with delicious Coke taste and reinvigorating energy. Keep the unicorns alive! Show up every day with Coca-Cola Energy. Energy you want, taste you love.
Celebrate the big 2020 with T-Mobile. Switch now and get 2 lines for just $90 and 2 new iPhone 11s on us. So you can take a portrait built for 2 with the ultra-wide camera.
Oh, that's a good one.
Oh, cute.
Hurry in to T-Mobile and get 2 lines for $90 and 2 iPhone 11s on us with qualifying trade-ins.
Via 24 credits for well-qualified buyers with autopay, plus taxes and fees. If you cancel before receiving 24 credits, you may owe up to the full value of your device of